My brother stole my business idea, and my parents told me to let it go because he's family. I just smiled and said, "Oh, don't worry, I've already handled it." In fact, if you check the news tomorrow morning, you'll probably see a headline that says, "Hey Reddit, long-time lurker, first-time poster." I never thought I have a story worth sharing, but after everything that's happened, I feel like this belongs here. I'm 34M, and my younger brother, let's call him Jake, 29M, has always been the golden child. He could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. Me? I was the responsible one, the one expected to clean up after his mistakes while he got a pat on the back for simply existing. For years, I kept my head down and worked hard. I wasn't the type to chase approval, but I did crave independence. That's why, 3 years ago, I started building my own business from scratch. I poured everything into it: time, money, sleepless nights, weekends sacrificed, the whole deal. It wasn't glamorous at first, but little by little, it grew into something real. I developed a unique product. I won't say what exactly for privacy reasons, but think along the lines of a niche tech startup. And after a lot of trial and error, I landed a few major clients. It was my baby, my future. And then Jake took it from me. It started out small, the way these things always do. He'd ask casual questions when we met up for family dinners. "Hey, how's your business going? What's the next big thing you're working on?" At first, I didn't think much of it. He'd never been interested in my work before, and honestly, I was just happy he was finally acting like he cared. Looking back, I should have seen the signs. He was taking notes. One day, he called me up all excited. "Dude, I have this amazing idea for a business." He started describing my idea, almost word for word. At first, I thought it was some kind of joke. "Jake, that's literally what I've been working on for the past 2 years." He laughed it off. "Oh yeah, but like I have my own spin on it." His spin was a barely tweaked version of my product. It was obvious he was testing the waters, trying to gauge how much I knew. I told him, point blank, that I wasn't comfortable with him pursuing something so similar. He shrugged it off. Fast forward a few months, and I found out through a mutual friend that Jake had launched his own startup using my exact concept. He even copied elements of my branding, my marketing strategy, things I'd spent years refining. The worst part? He had convinced my parents to invest in him. When I confronted him, he had the audacity to act surprised. "You don't own ideas, man. I just saw an opportunity and took it. Isn't that what business is about?" I was livid. I went straight to my parents, thinking, surely, they would see how messed up this was. But nope. "He's your brother," my mom said, as if that justified it. "He looks up to you. You should be flattered. Besides," my dad added, "he needs this more than you do. You've always been the smart one. You'll bounce back." They genuinely believed that since I was capable, I didn't need success as much as Jake did. That he was somehow entitled to my hard work because he wasn't as hardworking himself. I won't lie, that broke something in me. Not just the betrayal itself, but the fact that my own family saw nothing wrong with it. They expected me to just roll over and accept it. But I didn't. I told them, "Oh, don't worry. I've already handled it." And I meant it. What Jake didn't realize was that I wasn't some clueless amateur. I had legal protections in place. I had records. I had patents pending. And most importantly, I had receipts. I knew I had to play the long game. If I wanted true, undeniable revenge, I had to wait for the perfect moment. So I let Jake think he had won. I watched as he basked in the attention, as he got interviews and investors, all while knowing that the foundation he built his success on was nothing but stolen bricks. And then, just when he thought he had the upper hand, I made my move. Tomorrow morning, Jake is going to wake up to a reality he never saw coming. And if my parents thought I was just going to let it go, well, let's just say they're in for a rude awakening. I'll update you all soon. Update. The next morning, I woke up early, grabbed a coffee, and refreshed the news. There it was. A press release had just dropped. and it wasn't good news for Jake. See, while he'd been busy playing businessman, I've been working behind the scenes with my lawyer. I had evidence, timestamps, emails, drafts, even voice recordings of our conversations where he picked my brain for ideas. More importantly, I had legally filed the necessary patents and trademarks long before he ever announced his so-called startup. The press release was short and to the point. A major industry website had picked up the story. Startup under scrutiny for potential patent infringement. Legal experts weigh in it wasn't an outright takedown. Not yet. But it was enough to cause a ripple effect. Investors hate bad press. And Jake had just walked straight into a PR nightmare. I didn't hear from him right away, but I knew it was coming. He was probably scrambling, trying to do damage control, trying to figure out what went wrong. But the real fun started later that afternoon when my mom called. "What did you do?" she demanded, skipping any pleasantries. I played dumb. "What do you mean?" "Jake just called us in a panic. He said someone is trying to sabotage his business." I took another sip of coffee. "Oh wow, that sounds serious. Any idea who would do such a thing?" "You know exactly what I mean," she snapped. "I told you to let this go. He's your brother." I let out a small laugh. "And I told you, I handled it." There was silence on the other end. I could picture her gripping the phone, trying to process the fact that I wasn't backing down. "You don't understand," she finally said, her voice softer now, as if she was trying to appeal to me. "This business is so important to Jake. He's finally doing something with his life. If this falls apart, I don't know what he'll do." I clenched my jaw. And what about me? What about all the years I had worked for this? Did that not matter? Was I supposed to just step aside so Jake could play entrepreneur at my expense? I exhaled slowly. "Mom, I worked for years on this. I built this from the ground up. Jake stole from me. That's not ambition. That's not following his dreams. That's theft. He didn't mean to steal," she argued weakly. I cut her off. "Didn't mean to? He built an entire company around my work. And you think he just stumbled into it?" More silence. Then she tried a different tactic. "You've always been the smarter one. You're more capable. He struggles. You should want to help him." There it was. The same old argument. Jake was helpless. Jake needed me. I should sacrifice because he couldn't do it himself. I let out a dry chuckle. "So let me get this straight. You want me to let my actual business, the one I built, the one I own, crumble just so Jake can play CEO for a little longer?" "Don't be so dramatic," she snapped. "You're making this into a bigger deal than it needs to be." I smiled, even though she couldn't see it. "Oh, trust me, it is a big deal. And this is just the beginning." And with that, I ended the call. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Jake. I stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. I already knew how this was going to go. He'd be furious, throwing every insult he could think of before eventually breaking down and playing the victim. I sighed, then swiped to accept the call. Before I could even say hello, he exploded. "You snitch," he yelled. "You're trying to ruin me." I stayed calm. "Ruin you? I haven't even started yet." More silence. I could hear him breathing heavily, trying to hold back whatever emotion was bubbling up. Was it anger? Panic? A mix of both? "You don't get it," he finally said. His voice was lower now, more desperate. "This company is everything to me." I leaned back in my chair, resting my feet on my desk. That's funny, because it was everything to me first. He didn't have a response to that. Finally, he let out a bitter laugh. "Fine, you want to play dirty? Let's see who wins." I raised an eyebrow. "Oh, Jake, I don't play dirty. I win." Click. Call ended. I set my phone down, exhaling. The game had officially begun. I didn't hear from my parents for the rest of the evening, which was unusual. Normally, when Jake was upset, they would bombard me with calls and texts, trying to guilt me into fixing things. This time, radio silence. That meant one of two things. Either they were strategizing, or Jake hadn't told them the full story yet. The next morning, I got my answer. I was halfway through my emails when my phone lit up with a notification. A message from my mom. We need to talk. Family meeting. Tonight, 7 p.m. No excuses. I let out a sigh. A family meeting. That was their go-to whenever they wanted to resolve a situation, which in our family meant everyone gangs up on the reasonable person until they cave. I already knew what was coming. They would frame this as a misunderstanding. They would tell me to be the bigger person. They would insist that Jake didn't mean to hurt me and that we could work this out as a family. I thought about skipping it, but then I realized no. I wanted to see their faces when they realized just how deep Jake had gotten himself. So at exactly 7 p.m., I walked into my parents' house. Jake was already there, sitting on the couch with his arms crossed. He looked pissed. My mom was hovering near him like a protective guard dog, while my dad stood by the dining table, his face unreadable. I barely had time to sit before my mom started in. "Why are you doing this?" she demanded, arms crossed. "Do you have any idea what you're putting your brother through?" I leaned back. "What I'm putting him through?" I repeated. "Mom, he stole my business." My dad sighed like he was already exhausted. We know. But isn't there another way to settle this? Without lawyers? Without all this hostility?" I raised an eyebrow. "Without legal action? So what? Jake gets to keep profiting off my work, and I'm just supposed to smile and move on." Mom pressed her lips together. "You're being so dramatic. He didn't steal anything. He was just inspired by you." Jake scoffed. "God, you act like I robbed you at gunpoint. It's business. It happens all the time." I turned to him. "Yeah? And you know what else happens all the time? Companies getting sued for patent infringement. That shut him up real fast." My dad cleared his throat, stepping in like he was trying to mediate. "Look, we're just saying this doesn't have to get ugly. You're brothers. You should work together, not fight." I laughed. "Work together? That would have been a great idea before Jake went behind my back and took what wasn't his." Jake rolled his eyes. "Oh, please, you act like I ruined your life. You'll be fine. You always are. You don't need this." There it was. The same excuse my parents had used, that I didn't need it as much as he did. I tilted my head. "And you do." Jake hesitated, then scoffed. "Look, I already have investors. I already have a product out. You can't stop it now. So let's just, I don't know, figure something out. Maybe you can come work for me." I blinked. Then I laughed. A full, genuine laugh. He really thought that was an option. I stood up, adjusting my jacket. "Thanks for the offer, but I think I'll pass." Jake smirked. "Then I guess we're done here." I smiled. "Oh no, we're not." I walked out of that family meeting knowing one thing for sure. Jake and my parents weren't taking this seriously. They thought this was just another sibling fight, something that could be smoothed over with a half-hearted apology and some forced compromise. They didn't realize the storm that was coming. But Jake realized soon enough. A week later, the real consequences hit. His investors backed out. The patent infringement claim wasn't just a warning. It was real, and the legal weight behind it scared off every serious backer he had. No investor in their right mind would put money into a company that was already tangled in a legal mess before it even got off the ground. Then his website went down. That was the next step in my legal claim. Since his product was too similar to mine, he was forced to cease operations until the dispute was settled. And since I had all the original documentation, there was no doubt about how this was going to end. My favorite part? His employees, who he had barely hired before all this came crashing down, started jumping ship. No one wanted to work for a sinking company. My parents were furious. "How could you do this to your own brother?" My mom shrieked over the phone. "How could he do this to me?" I shot back. "He was trying to make something of himself," she argued. "And you just couldn't let him have this one thing?" I almost laughed. "This one thing? Mom, he took my entire business idea, ran with it, and acted like he came up with it himself. You think I should have just let that happen? Families forgive, she said coldly. Families don't steal from each other, I replied. After that, we barely spoke. Jake, meanwhile, was scrambling. His once cocky attitude was gone. He tried to pivot, rebrand, tweak his product to make it just different enough to avoid legal trouble, but it was too late. His name was already tainted in the industry, and no one wanted to work with him. The last time I saw him, he looked miserable. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. And honestly, I felt nothing. For once in my life, I hadn't just rolled over and taken it. I fought back, and I won. Well, my business is doing better than ever. After the whole mess with Jake, I tightened up my operations even further. I had a few bumps in the road when I had to stop what I was doing to clean up the mess he'd caused, but I didn't let it drag me down. If anything, it made me more determined. I doubled down on my patents, filed a few more to cover areas I hadn't even thought about before, and made sure my legal protections were ironclad. It's honestly been a wake-up call about how fragile things can be when you let your guard down. So I made sure my business is stronger now, both legally and financially. I've also got a few new clients lined up, and they seem to really value the security that comes with working with someone who isn't going to back down. As for Jake, well, last I heard, he moved back in with my parents. It's honestly kind of sad to think about. The cocky, I've got it all figured out version of him is long gone. Now he's just lost. He's been hopping from one half-baked idea to the next, trying to stay afloat in a world that's pretty much shut him out. The whole tech community has seen him for what he is, and his reputation is shot. He was a flash in the pan, and I think he's finally starting to realize that. It's not even that I want him to fail. I mean, part of me feels for him. He's my brother, and I wanted him to find success on his own terms. But he didn't want success. He wanted my success. He didn't want to put in the work. He wanted a shortcut. And now he's facing the consequences of thinking that everything could be handed to him. As for my parents, well, things are tense. They still don't get it. Every time I talk to them, they always bring up how I could have helped Jake more, how I could have been the bigger person. They still think that somehow I was the one who made things worse. They say I punished him instead of being a supportive older sibling. But the thing is, I did try to be supportive, and they just don't seem to understand that. They've always been more concerned with keeping the peace than seeing things for what they really are. Honestly, I've stopped trying to convince them. I've had to make a choice. I've realized that my boundaries matter more than keeping the peace, and if that means my relationship with them takes a hit, then so be it. I can't keep giving in just to make them happy, especially when it means sacrificing my own success. So, now I'm just moving forward. I'm keeping my head down, focusing on my business, and letting things with my family be what they are. If they want to keep blaming me for everything, that's on them. But I've done what I needed to do to protect myself, my future, and my business. So, Reddit, I've got to ask, am I the a-hole for not letting my brother get away with stealing my business? Should I have handled this differently, or was I right to stand my ground? If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like and subscribe for more. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the person handled this situation right, or were they too harsh? Drop your opinions below, and let's discuss.